pay ranges out of grad school as a social worker and then kind of where you're at now?
So like bachelor's level, it ranges anywhere between.
What do you think is one of the biggest causes of burnout for ER social workers?
I think it depends upon the person really, but I think the biggest reason for burnout is
how much social programs and government systems do you think affect and impact your work as an ER social worker?
so many.
Welcome to the Social Work HQ podcast, where we talk honestly about what social work jobs are actually like. I'm Mandy Wilcox. I'm an ER social worker, LCSW, and this show is for anyone who's interested in social work school, or a new grad, or maybe you're even a seasoned social worker looking to pivot your career. I'm here to help you choose the right role without guessing. Each episode, I interview social workers from different roles and settings to talk about their real day-to-day work, pay, burnout, and career paths, so that you can make informed decisions on what's going to be the best fit for you. Let's get into today's episode. Do you want to start out by telling us just a little bit about your history in social work? If you have a bachelor's degree in social work or master's, kind of what your social work history looks like.
Yeah, so in 2017, I got my bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University of Idaho.
Okay.
Right after I got my degree, I was working up in Idaho as a adult protective service reporter. So basically, I'd sit at the office, get reports of adult protective services, and then give it over to the ones who investigate.
Okay.
And then later on, a year later, moved down to Arizona, where I then worked as a third-party contractor with DCS to provide teaching for parents and visitation, so that way they could see their kids and then also get the required learning that they needed, so that way they could have their kids return to them. And then after that, I went into a law firm.
Okay.
That went into so this law firm specifically was an elder law firm. So they did a lot of elder care. They did a lot of like guardianships, paperwork like that. But they also have here in the state of Arizona a program called ALTEX, or Arizona Long-Term Care Systems. It's a program that's run by Medicaid, specifically for people who need long-term care, especially when long-term care can cost $30,000 to $40,000 a month.
Yes, it's so expensive.
So expensive. And so they have this program that people can apply for to get that qualification done. There's a lot of things that go into it, and I know enough to get myself into trouble. But it's a great program. There's a lot of things that you have to be aware of, and it's one that you really want to talk to a specialist about. But it got me started into this path of, I kind of want to do medical. And so I then went into care management for elderly, but it was during the time frame of COVID. So I only stayed there for a couple months just because it was hectic.
Yeah.
And it was bad. And then I went to SMI case management, and then I went into crisis care and did mobile crisis, where I get calls to go to someone's home or wherever you were on the street and go and talk to you.
Yeah.
And then during that time frame, I then got my master's in 2023, and I have now been working since 2023 at Banner Health as a ED social worker at their Trauma One Hospital. That's kind of my experience in general with social work. It's been very eclectic.
It sounds like kind of all over the place. You've gotten a lot of different experience.
Very good, very pivotal experience, I think, for me. In showing like, hey, you don't do just one thing.
Yeah.
And then you just gather information, and that's what you have.
Yeah, and I think that's great, because a lot of social workers, they get into the field and they I mean, at least I did. When I got into the field, I thought I was so limited and thought that I really could just do therapy. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because there are so many different roles that a social worker can do. It's just not very well known.
Yeah, there's just so many things. And I'm still learning every day that there's more out.
Yes. Yeah, I just found someone who is a social worker for TikTok. They work in tech. And I was like, that's very interesting. I hadn't heard of anything like that. There's new, just as time goes on, I'm sure there's more roles popping up here and there.
I heard of one recently, which was a veterinarian social worker.
Yes.
I was like, what?
I wanted to be a vet all growing up. And really, I chose to go into social work because I was too intimidated by the math and science part of veterinary work. But yes, I have heard of veterinary social workers, or like pet loss, grief counselors in social work. And yes, that sounds very interesting.
Agreed.
Yeah. So out of all of the experiences that you've had, sounds like you've had a lot. What has been your favorite role so far?
My current one is my favorite.
Okay.
I have found that in my time as a social worker, the things that I cannot do, or things that I do not enjoy, and one of them is consistent care management, where like I have a caseload that I have to follow all the time. I do not enjoy that.
You like the more unknown of the ER.
I love the unknown of the ER. I love, especially with this role, right? Being in a Trauma One hospital, major things that I have to attend to are traumas,
Right.
major medicals, finding out who a Jane or John Doe is, finding next of kin,
Yeah.
trying to find out who these individuals are. And especially at my hospital, when someone comes in through our trauma, we're not waiting to find out who this individual is to register them, to start working on them.
Right.
We're just registering them underneath a trauma name. And then I go in and I search the patient's belongings.
You're kind of the
Contact,
investigator a little bit.
Yes, I am investigating. And then if I find out, oh, by the way, this patient's allergic to, say, fentanyl, which is a major medication that we give so they can be okay, then it's something that I need to let them know so that we're not causing them to have an event.
Yeah.
And then another one is when major medicals, for your audience, I don't know if they know what the difference between a trauma is and what a major medical is.
Definitely explain, because I'm actually an ER social worker as well, and I have never heard the term major medical. I know of traumas, but yes, I'm definitely interested to learn that.
So with traumas, it is anyone who experiences a traumatic event. So it's like hitting your head, falling off of a ladder, having a knife stabbing wound, a gunshot wound, things that are a damage, right? Major medical is those that have cardiac events, like they're having a heart attack, they can't breathe, strokes, things like that. Those are things that are medically something that's not being caused. And a lot of times with the major medicals, it is heart attacks. And then you have the families that are coming in who are rightfully upset because a lot of times they're the ones that found their loved one down, not breathing. And that's traumatic.
Yeah. Or having to start CPR themselves can be really traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's also my opportunity to go in there and do a brief counseling session, and then helping them find out in that moment, hey, by the way, here's a packet. You're not remembering what I'm talking about because this time is hard. So here's something to go home with so that way you can kind of remember what I'm talking about. So that way you can make the best decisions for your loved one and you get that time to grieve together as a family.
Yeah.
And that's really, truly what I do. The other parts are yes, giving resources for homeless shelters, advocating for patients to make their own choices, working to make sure that any of our psych holds are being treated the way that they're supposed to be. And something that's coming around right now is what's the difference between guardianship, conservatorship, and mental health power of attorney? Because here in Arizona, we don't just have healthcare power of attorney and financial power of attorney. We also have mental health power of attorney. And many people don't know about the mental health power of attorney.
Yeah.
They assume that's part of healthcare, and it's not. And so finding out and learning the differences here can be a struggle for a lot of people, including when they're not informed about it. And there's a lot of miscommunication and understanding between if someone is saying suicidal, they don't want treatment, and they have a mental health power of attorney, does that kick in? It does not, because they're fully cognizant. They're just making a choice.
Does it only work then, if they're experiencing psychosis where they're not in their right mind to make those decisions then?
Yes, if they have been deemed unable to understand their circumstances and have a good insight into it, then it can kick into their mental health power of attorney.
Interesting.
But otherwise, it is their choice, and we can't take a choice away until we do what we call here in Arizona a petition, which is that forcing of someone being taken to mental health treatment against their will. I don't know what other states call it, but that's what we call it here in Maricopa County anyways.
I know, I don't know if it's the same thing, but in our ER, when we have patients come into the ER who clearly are unsafe to go back out into the community and they really need some mental health treatment, we call it a blue sheet. They're blue sheeted from the doctor, which means that the doctor is saying they're unsafe and that they can't leave. I know for police, it's called a pink sheet. So if police bring them in and say, hey, you need to keep them here until they can get some mental health treatment, then it's a pink sheet. But I'm sure that it's different in every area.
Yeah, that's not what we have. We say, oh, this person needs to go on a psych hold.
Yeah, the same thing. I guess they just title it differently, maybe.
Yeah, they probably title it differently. And I know for Maricopa County versus say Pinal County, which is another county in Arizona, we called the petition a totally different name. But it's the same process of us making sure that they get mental health treatment, even if it's against their will.
Yeah, very important. And it sounds like your role is different than that of a crisis worker that works specifically with those patients who are needing a behavioral health placement. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
We actually have a third-party contractor that's associated with Banner that does all of our psych things.
Okay.
So my job is to follow up after they do their psych evaluation and make sure that the patient is actually getting where they need to go, that everyone on the team knows what the plan is, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Gotcha. How much of your job would you say is patient-facing, and how much of it would you say is documentation?
I would almost say a good 50-50.
Okay.
Because if I'm not facing a patient, there's no documentation, almost.
Yeah.
Even with my psychs, which I really don't do a whole lot with, I'm still having a face-to-face with at least somebody
Mm-hmm.
with their care. So mom, dad, um, the counselor that came in. Sometimes I actually do see the patient. So a lot of times I'm even still doing face-to-face with that.
Okay. And I know for us, we're in a more rural area, and we don't get very many trauma ones or significant, I can't remember what you called it,
Major medical.
major medical, yes. How often are you getting trauma ones? And maybe you classify them differently. We classify them as trauma 1, trauma 2, and then a head strike or trauma 3. But how often are you getting those types of big trauma ones in, because you're in a trauma 1 center, we're not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, kind of your average.
The way we kind of prioritize them is trauma reds, trauma, and trauma yellows.
Okay.
Right. Trauma reds are the ones that are serious life and death ones for the most part, whereas trauma yellows are more like the head strikes, they fell off a ladder, things like that. So I would say for a trauma red or a trauma 1 that you would consider it, there's not a night I don't have a trauma of some sort. And here in Phoenix, where knife stabbings and gunshot wounds are very common, and then auto versus pedestrian,
yeah, I'm sure,
are high. I would say in a month time frame, right? I would say a good 60%, 50 to 60% of my traumas are trauma reds or trauma 1s, including like with auto versus pedestrians. I have more auto versus pedestrians than I have gunshot wounds or knife stabbing wounds. They're so unfortunately common.
Yeah.
And they are so deadly.
Yes, they can be.
They're just bad. Makes you go, oh, let's not jaywalk. That's not a great time.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like I said, we're not a trauma 1 center. So if we ever get any of those traumas, we always send them over to a different trauma 1 center. We have to life flight them from our hospital. So I'll kind of see the beginning of that, but then I don't see, the end. They get transferred. So
yeah, and I do get a lot of transfers from other hospitals because there's some just don't have the facilities or the care to get for traumas, and so whenever I get like a trauma from another hospital, I follow up with families. I follow up saying, hey, by the way, your loved one got here safely. I also say they were shot or stabbed or assaulted or whatever that caused them to be here. I'll also call police and make sure that a report has been completed. See if the patient, whoever hurt them, is actually in jail and in custody, including, this is a sad statement, but there's so many family members who are the ones that are perpetrating against the victim.
Yeah.
That's my patient. And I need to know, hey, was this done by a family or a friend? So that way we can put our patients under what's called NINP, or no information, no publication.
Yeah.
And so we can also then watch out to make sure that we're not contacting somebody that hurts the patient.
Yeah.
And so I'll follow up with a lot of that to make sure that all of those things have been completed.
Yeah, I think, any ER is probably pretty fast paced. You're doing a lot of different things all at the same time, a lot of things that need to be done quickly to manage the patient's care. But definitely for those who are interested in medical social work or ER social work, where you work and the level of, whether it's rural or not, will definitely determine how busy your ER is and kind of the cases that you work with as well. Yeah.
And my ER is a 100-bed ER.
Wow.
It's a massive ER.
Yeah.
You're always needed for something. And a learning of prioritization is crucial.
Yeah. And I would say that, they don't really, at least in my schooling, I don't remember them teaching us prioritization of cases or patients and what to do first. And so it's definitely a skill that you would learn in this job that you didn't learn in school.
Oh yeah. There's so many good things I learned in school and some things that you just did not learn. And that would be one of them.
Yeah.
And it's a hard knock road.
Yes. Did you always want to go into social work, or was it kind of an afterthought? Kind of what was your draw towards social work?
So no, I actually wanted to become a surgical nurse. And so in high school, I got my CNA, was getting my LPN to try to get into the nursing and make it so that I would have very little nursing stuff that I needed to get done. And then I got really sick to the point where I could not actually go and take the classes that I needed or be able to stand the way a surgical nurse would need to stand for 12 hours. And I just couldn't do that because of how sick I was. And so I was like, what degree takes anatomy and physiology as a prereq? And at the school I was going to, social work was the one that did that.
Really? That's interesting.
Yep. Part of the requirements of time was that I had to have at least 1 full year of anatomy and physiology.
Wait, and you went to BYU, Idaho, right? That's where I graduated with my bachelor's as well in 2017.
We graduated at the same time.
Yeah, I graduated in December 2017. What track did you?
July. I did.
Okay.
I finished in July.
So you were right before me.
Yeah,
I don't remember
me
taking that
too.
class.
No. Yeah, because it was a prereq.
I mean, I must have, I guess. I don't remember, but sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. It's interesting to know that we went to the same school right
Yes.
around the same time. And you
Yeah.
have a totally different remembrance than I do.
I mean, my memory is horrible, so I never trust it.
Goldfish. Goldfish. But yeah, no, it was a prereq. And I was like, oh, cool. I already have an entire year of this. Let's just use that. Yeah, and like I think the prereq was also like you could do this prereq or that prereq.
Hmm.
So there could be a difference there.
Yeah.
But
I
for
mean, I
me, it's
remember
like,
taking
oh,
a biology class. That's all. That's the
mm,
kind of the most physical type of class I remember taking.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no. So I got into social work, and then my family was always like, yeah, you should do counseling. You'd be great at it. And I was like, no. For me, I knew that I never wanted to do counseling
Hmm.
because, like, I'm a very empathetic individual. And at the time, I had a hard time distancing the secondhand trauma
Yeah.
from my own issues.
Hmm.
And so I knew that for me, doing counseling was just not going to be my path
Hmm.
because I just at the time didn't know how to separate it out. Could I do it now that I've done this for so long? Probably,
Hmm.
but it's still not what I would like to do.
Yeah.
I think there's great things to happen with counseling, but that's just
Not for you.
not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, everyone has kind of their niche and what they're good at. And I like to say one reason I like the ER instead of either like the hospital units or other social work roles is I work with a patient for a couple hours and then they're gone. And, I don't walk into work the next day knowing that I'm working with the same patients, which sometimes, people like that. They like to get a little bit more involved or get to know their patients a little bit more. But for me and my personality, I like knowing that I work with them, they leave, I work with someone else next kind of thing.
Agreed. 100%. I'm always like, yeah, I'm in there for 15, 30 minutes and then I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely interesting just how different everyone's personalities are. Would you say, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Do you have a
Introvert.
introvert? Yes, same. And for me at least, I really struggled with the ER at first because when I took my ER job, I was fresh out of grad school and I just felt very nervous going into patients' rooms, and the traumas really intimidated me as an introvert. Having to like speak up to the doctor while all the other staff are also in the room was very intimidating to me. So I think for introverts who are listening to this, definitely know that you can get used to it. It's not as bad as when you start, but I think definitely it depends on maybe your personality as an introvert as well. But it sounds like you're an introvert too and you really like what you do. So
100% I'm an introvert. I love to be by myself.
mm-hmm.
Though I think the benefit for my prior history is that I've learned to have extrovert tendencies, which help me in the fast-paced ER.
Yeah.
Whereas I would love to just seclude myself and not talk to people. It's
Mm-hmm.
forced me to be able to do it and be okay with it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a benefit to having prior experiences as a bachelor
Mm-hmm.
to not get over, but to learn to cope as a social worker. Because social work is a very extrovert
Yes.
degree.
Yeah. Didn't realize that when I was going into the field, but definitely realize
Nope.
it now.
Yes. And my probably an unhelpful motto, but a motto that I have is fake it till you make it and be humble.
There you go.
Because I'm always learning. I can always say, I have no idea,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll go look.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. And I think as social workers, especially in the healthcare systems, is we tend to be kind of a catch-all. And if there's something that someone doesn't know or doesn't really fall into someone else's job responsibilities, then the social work catches it. And we have to be learning to do new things or to find out more information on something that we've never done before. So it's definitely a well-rounded job.
Oh, yes. The amount of times that you're the ethicist,
Mm-hmm.
the risk managers, let's find that policy
Mm-hmm.
is amazing.
Yeah. Yes. It's very common.
And another one that I come across, I don't know, with a smaller ER or a more rural area, but I also find I'm almost like a bouncer
Mm-hmm.
where I get people who come in and then I have my nurses or people from the triage calling me saying, hey, this family's causing an incident. Can you help us?
Yes. Yeah.
And then going and doing that.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't get that a lot because most of the family members or patients who cause problems are usually the patients on a mental health hold, psychiatric hold. And because I'm not a crisis worker, usually the crisis worker goes and deals with those patients or those family members. So, which is something I'm grateful for. I never want to be a crisis worker. I'm okay with my case management and traumas for now.
Mm-hmm. Like if I go back to case management, or not case management, crisis,
Mm-hmm.
I would struggle with it at this point. At the time, I love crisis, and now I'm like, no, I don't need to do crisis mental health anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think is the most important skill someone needs for a job like yours?
The willingness to fly by the seat of your pants and the
Mm-hmm.
ability to prioritize cases at a fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
And then critical thinking
Yeah.
with a strong ethical back to it.
That's fair. What would you say, if you're able to think of any on the spot, kind of what prioritizing cases would look like? So if you can think of like a case that would be high priority and then maybe one that would be less priority, just to give the listeners an example.
Okay, so let me kind of give an example that happened just recently, right? I had a trauma red, a major medical, full code, which is what we call CPR, like they're not breathing and they need to have chest compressions. We call that a full code. And then a patient that needed homeless and detox resources. And I had all that happen within minutes of each other.
Of course.
Right? That's how it always happens. My first priority is going to be the trauma red. That trauma red, we don't have any information about that patient.
Mm-hmm.
And it is my job to find out who that patient is and make sure that we are not giving medications that are not good for that patient. And so that's my first priority. The next one will be the major medical, say families involved, right? In normal cases, I prioritize the major medical no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of depends upon what's going on with that major medical.
Mm-hmm.
So say that major medical, we're still doing CPR after I'm done with that trauma red. I see that major medical we're still working on. That's my next priority, to find out who the next of kin is, what if they are a DNR, DNI. If
Mm-hmm.
people don't know what a DNR, DNI is, it's do not resuscitate, do not intubate. It is an order that they have so that way they can make that choice. But say that major medical actually has a heartbeat now, they're intubated, but they're okay. They're going to start doing CT scans and getting them to the correct floors. It's a little bit lower on the totem pole.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're stabilized. And at that moment, I do not need to find family immediately. Now, say family shows up for them, I'm going to deal with the family. I'm going in, talking to the family, making sure that the doctor's aware of who's in the room. I'm normally the first contact to make sure that we have a settled down and calm area
Mm-hmm.
for the doctor to go in, and then helping this family get to their next location. And then at the very bottom will be my resources. And that's kind of how I prioritize. Now, say you have a night where you have a behavioral holding that you have for a petition, you have 3 different resources that you need to give to different patients, and transportation. Transportation in Arizona, right? We have insurances that cover transportation benefits, and they take forever to get done. And so I'll prioritize getting those resources done first, because a lot of times those patients also want transportation, and I want to make sure I get all those transportations done all at once. And so I'll go back to my desk, I'll start doing the transportations, and then calling at the same time for the petition to see what's going on, see what's happening, to make sure that this patient gets where they need to go. And you can do both at the same time a lot of times. And that's kind of how I prioritize those lower needs.
Mm-hmm.
Is what can I do all at once, get done, and then combine to make sure that they're all done at once in a pretty swift time. How about yourself? Because that's a question that I have for a lot of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my prioritization is pretty similar to yours. Luckily, because we're in a smaller area and a smaller hospital, we usually don't have a lot of stuff piling on all at once, but occasionally we do, for sure. Very similar to what you said. You deal with the most traumatic events first, make sure that the medical team knows who this patient is, see if you can find any information on them, contact family, whatnot. We also, I think we probably do a little bit more case management type stuff rather than, I think from what it sounds like, because you're in a bigger hospital, a trauma 1 hospital, majority of your job is the traumas and major medicals and stuff like that. Do all of those, they just aren't as common, so we also do a lot of random consultations. At one point, we were setting up oxygen for patients. Of course, we set up home health and hospice for patients. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys do. So we are kind of like, they call us the care manager, social workers. So we are there for the traumas and cardiac arrests and all of that, but we also do all of that case management type work as well. All the mental health assessments before they, if someone's just dealing with anxiety or depression, we'll go see them rather than the crisis worker. And then all of the substance use assessments, getting people into detox, stuff like that. But in regards to prioritization, I think you nailed it. Very, very solid, for sure.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah. What are the most common reasons that you think people would leave this role in the ER?
I think the most common reasons people would leave is the fast pace,
Mm-hmm.
with maybe the lack of resource or lack of help.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times this is a personality kind of job. If you don't have the right personality, you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think I've heard that it's a different breed of people that work in the ER, including doctors and nurses. And working with doctors and nurses in the ER comes with its own challenges, I think, for sure. I was going to ask, do you guys have multiple social workers that are in your role on shift at once, or do you guys rotate shifts? Kind of what does your scheduling look like? Because we're not a trauma one hospital, we're just a smaller hospital. We have 20 rooms in our ER, so it's just me on shift, and we work 10:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., so 12 hours. What is your guys' shift and scheduling like?
So as a trauma one hospital here in Arizona, we are mandated to have 24/7
Okay. In person.
social workers. And so for us, our shifts are 6 to 6:30.
Okay.
I do the night shift, so I'm 6 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. And there's only 2 of us. So she does the front half of the week, and I do like the back end of the week with a rotating shift on a Wednesday.
Okay.
During the daytime, there's 3 different ones that will do different shifts. So some of them will do like 3 and then 2 and 2 and work up on the floors for like their other 2 days to reach their 40. And then maybe they won't, just depending upon circumstances, right? But that's how we have that.
Okay. And then if you're willing to share just general numbers, nothing specific, but kind of pay ranges for someone in Arizona, kind of out of grad school as a social worker, and then kind of where you're at now.
So like bachelor's level, I would think it ranges anywhere between $15.50, which is the minimum here, to about $20. And then with master's level, depending upon your field and what you're doing, right, there's actually a big range there, depending upon what you kind of want to do. So it could be anywhere between like $28 to like $56 to $60 an hour. And like specifically with like crisis counselors, like CPR, which is our third party contractor, right? They are contractors. And so for them, it's anywhere between $120 to $140, I believe, per client that they see. Okay. So it really does range depending upon what field you're looking at, right?
Yeah.
I know for Banner University Hospital, it's anywhere between 28 to 56, I believe.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
I feel like medical social work is definitely one of the higher paying areas of social work, which I'm grateful for.
Percent.
Yeah.
It is definitely one of the higher paying unless you're wanting to do private practice.
Yeah, definitely. In regards to medical social work and working in the ER, what do you think is one of the biggest causes of burnout for ER social workers?
I think it depends upon the person, really. But I think the biggest reason for burnout is the things that you see, specifically in a trauma one hospital, right? Yeah. We are seeing traumatic things, and learning how to release those traumatic things can be really hard. And having to know your boundaries, right? Yeah. There's a reason I don't work in a children's hospital. I could not do trauma one children.
Yeah, that'd be hard.
Yeah. There's just something I couldn't do with that. And that takes a special person. So knowing who you are and knowing what you can and cannot handle is a big thing. And sometimes you don't know you can't handle it until you do.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I think for the ER, it may not be the right fit, and maybe poor management.
Yeah.
I have found that management and coworkers can be the biggest issues. 100%. I've been in this role for 3 years, and I don't want to transfer out because I love my managers and I love my coworkers. Yeah. But there have been jobs where I'm like, oh no. And that I think could be a big thing. Give me 1 second, my light turned out.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, I think especially for new social workers, having a good supervisor is vital, I think, to your experience in the field. Because if you don't get a good supervisor, I think it can really jade you or just discourage you from the field and learning. I mean, many of us, I think pretty much in every state, we're required to do usually thousands of hours of work under supervision. And if you don't find a good supervisor, it can really deter you in the field, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it really does make or break something for you if you don't have someone that backs you up and or micromanages.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that how much of social programs and government systems do you think affect and impact your work as an ER social worker?
So many. So it's hard to explain. Like down here in Arizona, specifically in Maricopa County, we have a lot of homeless populations. And because we have so many homeless individuals, our homeless programs are constantly full. There's a waiting list a mile long for a lot of these places, which is hard. And there are days that you're like, I want to get that person into some kind of shelter or something so that way they're not on the streets. And there's a lack of resources. There's a lack of programs out there for it. And I think last year, so a lot of the homeless people like to stay in like parks or recreational parks. Last year, they're like, nope, the state was like, we're not going to let that happen anymore. And so they actually put an initiative out to police to force any homeless people out in the parks out. So more and more homeless people are actually on like the street versus in a park. And with Arizona being so hot and the concrete reflecting back heat, it's really dangerous. And so the amount of people who have heat stroke or who are found down with burn marks because of how hot it is ridiculous. And then like with the mental health piece, there's a lot that goes into that in trying to make sure that we are following the laws about those things. Because it's a really, really interesting here for the mental health piece. And then the programs for that are, since I've never really been anywhere else other than Arizona for them, they're very different from what I understand. So anyone who's like an SMI case manager or so serious mental illness or SMI, they have their programs that have a lot of red tape. And sometimes that affects the hospital.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people are homeless because they can't get them anywhere. And it's because of the red tape that's been put up for mental health.
Yeah, a lot of hoops to jump through, it seems, for a lot of these programs.
Yeah, and unfortunate hoops that really don't need to be there.
Yeah. Do you think, are there any specific changes that you'd like to see in the social work field in the future?
In general or specific role?
Both, if you have both.
So in general, something I would like to see more about for social work is advocating for yourself.
That's great.
And knowing that we as a social work profession do not have to let others run all over us. The fact that there's unions for so many other places, but social work does not have our own union. That thought process, like we have no one to advocate for ourselves, and we're almost trained to not advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, probably.
I think that's a failure for ourselves, because how do we advocate for somebody else if we don't know how to advocate for ourselves? But job specific, I think for like ED social work, that's a harder one because I think it's very specific to like my actual situation versus ED social work in general.
Yeah.
The thing I would like to see more helpful in this ED social work is the training on it. There's nothing really training specific for like an ED social work or medical social work in a hospital. I know when I went and did my master's program specifically for medical social work, I don't feel like I got the training on how that works. It was more generalistic, which is not what I went for. I was like, I want medical social work. So I think better training on what that looks like and realizing it's not your standard social work. I'm not going out and doing an assessment with a biopsychosocial and then doing ACT therapy or EMDR.
Yeah, hopefully this interview will help educate people.
Right? It's very different, but it's still social work. You just have to reframe it in your brain.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that you can practice social work. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you're practicing the code of ethics, then you're practicing social work. So, and I mean, that is what we do in a roundabout way. We're always practicing that code of ethics. So.
And it's one thing that I still think about every time I'm at work. It's like, how am I making this person autonomous, or how am I, you name the ethics, and I'm thinking about it going, okay, how do I make this work for my patient?
Yeah, I definitely think, at least for me, I remember, learning lots about the code of ethics in school, but in all my jobs after school, there wasn't a lot of focus on the code of ethics. And I think having more focus on it and teaching new social workers kind of how their role really ties into each of the ethics and each of the values of social work could be really helpful for them to kind of tie it to real examples.
For an example, because I have right now a intern that's following me, and we had a case came up where something happened, and I told this new intern, I was like, so one thing that we have to be aware of is that we are a hospital, we are not the law. So many patients come in who came in by police, and they have a warrant out for their arrest, but if police do not sit on them, that means that they're not under arrest. And we are not to call police to let them know, hey, by the way, they're leaving our hospital, come get them.
Right.
Because we are not the law. We are just there to help them be safe.
Yeah. Or like, I think right now something that's very scary for people is illegal immigrants coming into the ERs. And sometimes they're afraid for us to know that because they're afraid that they'll get reported. And we just have to remind them, that's not our role. We are here to make sure you get the healthcare that you need and the support that you need. That's not our job. We don't care. We just want to make sure you're safe and healthy.
And this intern was like, oh, wait a minute, we don't call police if they're in PD custody. I'm like, are they sitting on them? It's like, no. And then I'm like, they're not in PD custody.
Mm-hmm.
And having to rethink that, because like sometimes we're trained, if they're in PD custody, that means that we have to follow through with that.
Yeah.
No, they have to sit on them.
Yeah, definitely. I think the ER social workers also work with a lot of different departments throughout the city and community than maybe other social work roles.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of hands-on with police, fire, ICE. They
Yeah.
all, one that I deal a lot with is actually Native tribe.
Really?
Because we're surrounded by different reses,
Mm-hmm.
and we're one of the major hospitals that the res will send their patients to.
Okay.
And something I didn't know until this job was that anyone who has a crime committed on Native land is either dealt by the FBI or DEA. And so I actually have to contact FBI and DEA if they're following up on this case.
Interesting.
Not to report anything, but to see if they're actually following through.
Yeah.
And if they're going to come and talk to the patient and so on and so forth.
That's very interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, so many new things and so unique to the location you're in, for sure. I know for me, I'm in a very religious community, and so that's something that we work with and deal with a lot is a lot of religious trauma and all the other things that kind of go along with that. So, any other advice that you would share with your younger self or new social workers? I've kind of asked all the questions that I've got, but anything else that you want to share?
Be kind to yourself. Do different jobs. Find what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And be okay with that. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's great advice. If this conversation was helpful, definitely leave a comment, leave a review. If you want to subscribe, that would be awesome. You can also find free resources and career tools at the link below to help you explore your options and plan your next steps in the social work career. Finally, if you are a social worker and would like to share your experiences on the channel to help other social workers in their career, we would love to have you on. Thanks for listening. See you next time.